glad you could join me again today. The last visit, we started talking about Mary. Blessed is she that believed. It's a wonderful thing to meditate on that idea and apply it to yourself. What would it mean to be someone who believed? And we're going to continue with this theme, but today we're going to consider Joseph, the precious man of Mary's dreams. He's blessed because he obeyed. And we're introduced to him in the first chapter of Matthew at the end of a long, long genealogy. But his whole dilemma is wrapped up in one verse. Verse 18 reads, "Now the birth of Jesus Christ was on this wise, when as his mother Mary was espoused to Joseph, before they came together, she was found with child of the Holy Ghost." Just this one statement tells us that all of Joseph's hopes for a good life, for a happy marriage, for precious normality have shifted just with this one verse. Joseph is called a just man, and that means he's a man of integrity and character. He has the respect of those around him, and he follows the Jewish law. He's a good man. And so he's caught between a rock and a hard place when Mary makes her announcement. But he isn't reactionary. He doesn't lose his temper. He just becomes thoughtful. And he begins thinking deeply about what is the best thing to do, what is the right thing to do. The law requires him to put Mary away. That means to send her away, to release her from the engagement, or literally to divorce her. And this would be humiliating for both of them. Well, thankfully, while he's dreaming and sleeping about what in the world he's going to do, there's an angel standing on duty. Joseph's fears are calmed when the angel affirms Mary's story and gives him some solid direction. Go ahead with your marriage. It's going to be a baby boy. Name him Jesus, and this fulfills prophecy. And thankfully, Joseph was the type of man who was willing to obey. Verse 24 says, "Then Joseph, being raised from sleep, did as the angel of the Lord had bidden him, and took unto him his wife." There's an interesting little bit here if you think about this. To take his wife usually means to consummate the marriage, but we are assured in verse 25 that they did not do that. They waited until after the baby Jesus was born. So can you imagine? They got married and they waited nearly a year before they had physical contact. Poor Joseph, that is not the honeymoon that he dreamed of. Anyway, it seems to be at this point where Mary goes to spend 3 months with Elizabeth. And we talked about that when we talked about Mary last time. But I also got to thinking about how her visit was from the standpoint of Joseph and the idea of obedience. So if we think about that, maybe he sent Mary to Elizabeth so he could avoid physical contact, so he could maintain his character and keep his promise to God, to help him to be able to obey. Maybe he'd heard about the situation between Zacharias and Elizabeth and felt this would be a good place for Mary to talk it through. All three of them, Joseph, Mary, and Elizabeth, had had a visit from an angel, and maybe they needed to have some time to figure things out and to think about what was happening. You know, men would have ridiculed him when they knew Mary was pregnant, and some would have not believed the story about the angel. That would have seemed like a wild fairy tale. So maybe he felt, again, this was the best way to be the protector, to protect Mary. And again, that shows his character, and it shows that he's taking on the role that God has given him of protector of the newborn baby. But none of this was the way Joseph had hoped for things to go. I'm sure he was probably disappointed and confused. But this man knew his job. He had a mandate from the angel, and his job was to lay aside his feelings and care for this mother and unborn child, the promised Messiah. And Joseph's obedience is there. It's also seen later as they go into the trip to Bethlehem. And remember, he's a good man, a kind and caring man. He would not want to drag his heavily pregnant wife across the country so close to the time of delivery. And again, maybe he did, and maybe he did not know that the prophecy of the Messiah was that it would be born in Bethlehem. But he was willing to obey the laws of the land and cast himself and the situation into the hands of God. And most of the remainder of the story of Joseph, he just seems to be a watchful bystander. But when things get dangerous and the angel comes again, he takes the young child and his mother and he flees as he's directed into Egypt, and he's told to stay there until the angel brings word. And so what did he do? He did exactly that. He rose and he departed into Egypt. He took Mary and the baby Jesus, and they stayed there until the angel brought word again. He faithfully obeyed God's instruction at every step. And isn't that a good example for us? So let's ask ourselves a few questions. How do we respond when we're thrown a curveball? What about when our plans get shifted and things don't work out the way we think they should? Do we take time to listen for the Lord and seek His instruction? Or do we just pout and stomp and dig in our heels? How do we react when we have to go out of our way, put ourselves aside, walk that extra mile, or put the needs of others above our own? Do we do it in a begrudging way? Do we get annoyed? Do we become passive aggressive? Do we demand our own way? If I have to do this, it's going to be my way. If you need that help, it's got to come my way. Or do we get short-tempered or withholding? We don't see any of those things in the example of Joseph. His example is obedience, and it's also sacrifice. This man, well established in his community, was taken through a series of challenges that required him to keep his head, to commit his plans to God, to obey without question and act by faith, believing, just as Mary did, that God was directing their journey. The blessing of obedience is on the other side. You have to obey to get the blessing. And Joseph did that. He took this huge risk. He obeyed God, and God blessed him. So this Christmas, you might be called upon to shift your plans. Things might not go just the way you think they will. You might be asked to put the needs of others ahead of your own and to obey God's direction. I hope that you will take Joseph's example and be blessed through your own personal obedience and sacrifice. You can read more about Mary and Joseph on my blog, Beside the Well, and you can access that and my books on my website, gailgritz.com. But next visit, we're going to consider Blessed Are They Who Received, and I hope you'll join me. See you next time.